Welcome to Snail Story. How have things been going for you lately? Is life overwhelming right now? Or do you still have a small, quiet corner where you can just breathe? Today's story begins in an old garage where a lonely man opens the door and finds a child left behind with a star-shaped scar on his chest. No one knew who the boy's parents were. No one asked why he had gotten lost in this world except for him, Callan, a mechanic who didn't know how to love with words, but did it with every sleepless night, with egg-free soup, and with 3 years of never leaving a hospital bedside. And when the woman he once loved returned, carrying truths left unspoken, everything unraveled into one haunting question: what truly makes a family? If you believe that love doesn't need paperwork, if you've ever wished for someone to stay, not out of obligation, but from the heart, then stay with us till the end of this story. And don't forget to like and subscribe to Snail Story, so every week we can meet again for another slow but deeply real journey of healing. Asterisk. The wheezing sound in the night rang out like the first warning. Callan Brooks jolted upright from the single bed in his small wooden cabin, his heart pounding wildly. The forest wind whispered through the cracks in the window frame, but the chill outside was nothing compared to the tremble that gripped his chest, that instinctive dread only fathers knew, the kind built from hundreds of sleepless nights, worrying over coughs and fevers. The room next door was silent, but not peaceful. He pushed open the door and froze. Leo, a 5-year-old boy he'd been raising since the child was 3, was lying on the small bed, convulsing. The boy's small frame was rigid, shuddering with jerks, eyes rolled back, showing only white, his lips murmuring a string of meaningless, fragmented words. His skin was burning red with fever, and sweat drenched the pillow beneath him. "Leo," Callan shouted, rushing to the bed. "Can you hear me, buddy? It's Dad." He didn't know what to do first: press his hand to the boy's forehead or steady the violently shaking shoulders. 3 years of fatherhood, though not by blood, had taught him how to bandage scraped knees, to soothe nightmares, to make rice porridge when the fever was low. But this wild seizure, this searing heat, these fevered whispers as if something unseen had taken over, this was beyond anything he knew. Frantically, he grabbed a wet towel to cool Leo's body, then sprinted back to his room for the phone. No signal. The forest's network had been spotty all week. His pickup truck, still in the shed with a busted gearbox he couldn't afford to fix. Callan cursed under his breath. How had things gotten this bad? There was only one choice: run to Ruby's house, the elderly neighbor who had once helped him when he first took Leo in, without thinking twice. Callan wrapped the boy in a blanket and bolted into the cold night. "He's burning up 104 degrees. Callan gasped as he ran. "Please don't take him away from me." The door to Ruby's house swung open before he could knock a third time. She, a black woman in her 60s, with a voice as warm as steamed milk, took one glance at Leo and didn't ask a single question. "Take the car. Keys are by the stove. Just go. I'll call the hospital." Callan nodded, unable to speak a word of thanks. He jumped into the old SUV, started the engine, and tore down the pothole-ridden dirt road for the 15-minute stretch from the woods to the town hospital. Callan never once took his eyes off the rearview mirror. Leo lay on the back seat, his face twisting in pain one moment and going eerily still the next. At one point, the boy opened his eyes, looking straight at Callan through the mirror. "Daddy." His voice was thin as paper, distant, like it came from some other dream. "The pretty doctor lady, she's waiting for us." Callan flinched, nearly losing control of the steering wheel. He didn't get a chance to ask what Leo meant. The boy was slipping again, trapped in a semi-conscious daze. His breathing was labored, his lips moving, but no sound coming out. When they reached the hospital, Callan slammed the brakes in front of the emergency entrance. He rushed in with Leo in his arms, soaked in sweat, trembling and barely responsive. "Emergency?" Callan shouted. "He's seizing high fever, please." The nurse at the desk stepped forward, intending to ask questions, but the look in her eyes changed the moment she saw the boy. "Our room 3. Page Dr. Hayes. Now?" Callan followed, his chest tightening at the name. Hayes. No, it couldn't be he. Laid Leo on the examination bed. The cold white fluorescent light shone down on the boy's flushed face. Callan held the little hand, his own calloused from years of carpentry, trembling despite himself. Footsteps echoed hurriedly from the hallway. The door burst open and for a second time stopped. She was standing there, Dr. Camille Hayes, hair pulled back neatly, white coat crisp, stethoscope around her neck. Everything about her screamed professionalism, except the stunned look in her eyes when they landed on him. The clipboard slipped from her hands and hit the floor with a hollow thud. "Callan," her voice came out hoarse, unfamiliar, like it had traveled through someone else's throat. He opened his mouth, but nothing came out. His throat felt scorched and dry. 7 years. 7 years since the night she left without a word, only a note saying she needed time. And now here she was, in this sterile white room in the middle of the night, standing face to face with the man she had walked away from and the unfinished future they'd once dared to dream. A faint moan from Leo pulled them both back to the present. Camille gripped her stethoscope tightly, her expression flipping into sharp clinical focus. I need you to step back a little," she said, voice steadying. "I have to check his neurological responses." Callan nodded, though his legs refused to move. He didn't know what awaited him behind this hospital door, except that the only child he had ever loved as his own was lying there, between two people who once loved each other, once fell apart, and might now be forced to face a truth neither of them had ever prepared for. Camille Hayes stood beside the hospital bed, her fingers tightening around the stethoscope, her breath still not fully steady. She had thought about seeing Callan again more than once during long overnight shifts, when her mind would drift back to those university years, those afternoons reading by the river, or the way he used to quietly place a hand on her back when she was too tired to speak. But never had she imagined their reunion would happen like this in a sterile emergency room, with a child fighting for his life. She gently touched the boy's forehead. 104 degrees. "Sluggish pupil reaction," Camille murmured. "More to herself than anyone else." Callan still stood at the foot of the bed, gripping the chair rail as if it were the only thing keeping him from collapsing. "How long has he been showing symptoms?" she asked, her voice professional. "About an hour," Callan replied. "The fever started around midnight. Then he started seizing and saying strange things, like he was dreaming or possessed or something." Camille nodded, placing the stethoscope on Leo's chest, listening. Heart rate elevated. Irregular lung sounds. When she leaned down to check the lymph nodes in his neck, her hand froze. Just beneath the left side of Leo's jawline was a small star-shaped birthmark, no bigger than a pinky fingertip, but strikingly sharp in outline. Camille shivered. "Call the lab," she signaled to the nurse. "Full panel blood work, autoimmune markers, bacterial, viral, electrolytes, and especially ANA. Do you want to do a spinal tap?" The nurse asked. Camille looked at Leo again, then shook her head. "Not yet. We need to rule out autoimmune syndromes first. I need the full panel." Callan frowned. "Autoimmune? What do you mean?" "There's a rare condition, autoimmune encephalitis," Camille explained, her voice slow but not cold. "Leo's symptoms match almost perfectly. High fever, altered consciousness, seizures, behavioral disturbances," and she hesitated. And Callan stepped closer. "That disease took a patient's life here 5 years ago." Camille looked at Callan, her eyes locking with something buried deep in his memory. "Amelia Brooks," she said softly. I remember that name. The woman. With a birthmark exactly like his. Callan froze. My sister. Silence. Something clicked in Camille's mind, sharp and bright like an operating room light. What did you say? Amelia was my older sister. She died after giving birth. I don't know much about what happened. We'd been out of touch. For a while, Camille turned away, pacing a few steps as if needing distance to stay composed. There was a female patient named Amelia Brooks, who died here from complications of autoimmune encephalitis. I was a resident back then. It was an extremely rare case. And now, a child with the same symptoms and the same birthmark shows up. Callan felt himself pulled back into the past, to those nights he spent searching for his sister after she disappeared. He had no idea she'd been hospitalized here. No one told him. No one reached out. Leo, is he my sister's son? He whispered. We can't be certain yet, but I need to know. How did the boy come to you? Alan swallowed hard. 3 years ago, a woman named Renee Walsh brought him to me. Said my sister died giving birth, and she, the only relative left, couldn't raise him. She told me I was the boy's last hope. Did you check any documents? I did. She gave me papers. I thought they were real. I just saw a child with nowhere to go. He looked at me with the same eyes my sister had when we were kids. I couldn't. Camille turned back to him. Her expression now wasn't clinical. It was layered with emotion, shock, doubt, sadness, and something that almost resembled fear. If Leo really is Amelia's biological son, she said quietly, and he's inherited this autoimmune condition every day without proper treatment could kill him. A knock on the door. A nurse handed over the first set of lab results. Camille scanned the chart. The numbers leaped out at her, confirming her worst suspicion: abnormally high ANA levels, elevated CRP, high white blood cell count, clear indicators of an overactive PROS-O. She turned to Callan. We'll need to run genetic tests. And we must look into Renee Walsh, because if she's not a real relative, there's a chance she took Leo out of the system. It could be kidnapping. Callan's head spun. He sank into a chair, burying his face in his hands. He remembered Renee's eyes. The way she rushed off after handing Leo to him, like someone afraid of being chased. Was Leo really his nephew? Or just a child being used, handed over to him as a cover for something far darker? Leo's small hand moved slightly. Callan gripped it tightly. No matter what, this boy is my son, he whispered, and I won't let anyone take him from me. Camille stood frozen. Once again, she saw the man before her, no longer the clumsy college boy she once loved, but a father, willing to stand against the world to protect the one thing that mattered most. Leo was gasping on the hospital bed, his eyelids twitching, lips moving as if speaking to someone in a dream only he could see. Camille stood frozen in the center of the room, the lab results still clutched in her hand. The red numbers screamed warning. Leo's immune system was attacking his own brain. She took a deep breath, steadying herself, trying not to get lost in the hazy memories suddenly surging to life. We have to start the special treatment protocol, she told the nurse quickly. Prepare high-dose methylprednisone. Admit him immediately. You'll need guardian consent, the nurse reminded. Camille turned to Callan, who was sitting still beside the bed, gripping Leo's hand like a drowning man holding onto a piece of driftwood. Do you consent to intensive therapy? She asked. Callan didn't answer right away. He looked down at the boy, eyes full of fear. Is there any hope? There is, she replied, but not much. Leo's condition is extremely rare. I've treated a few similar cases, but each person reacts differently. If we don't intervene now, the brain damage could become irreversible. Then do it, Callan said softly. I don't care what happens to me. Just save him. Camille nodded, then turned to leave. But after a few steps, she froze. The image of the star-shaped birthmark on Leo's neck flashed in her mind again. That exact mark, that exact spot, etched in her memory from a night shift 5 years ago. Back then, she was still a resident, inexperienced and exhausted from non-stop emergencies. That night, a young woman named Amelia had been admitted. Full-term pregnancy, high fever, delirium. The case progressed so rapidly, no one had time to react within 6 hours. The woman had died from undiagnosed autoimmune encephalitis. Camille still remembered clearly. The baby had been delivered via emergency C-section. A boy, 2.7 kilograms. Healthy, with a star-shaped birthmark under his jaw. She had held that baby, rocked him gently while waiting for him to be taken to the newborn unit. And then everything faded. Because the next day, when she went to check in, the baby was gone. Camille took a step back, as if something inside her had yanked her out of the present. Camille. Callan called, his voice worried. She blinked, gathering herself. I need to check some old records. What do you mean? I think I may have seen Leo before, when he was just a newborn. She left the room, heart pounding like a drum. As she passed the night shift station, she spotted head nurse Geneva, who had worked here for over 20 years, jotting notes. Nurse Geneva, Camille approached. I need to ask you something. Do you remember a case, a young woman named Amelia Brooks, who died post-delivery in 2019? Geneva looked up, surprised. Yeah, the one who passed right after an emergency C-section, right? Why are you asking? Her baby. Do you recall anything strange? I have this feeling the child was never transferred to the newborn ward. Geneva frowned. Now that you mention it, something weird did happen. That night, a woman showed up claiming to be the baby's aunt. Said the mother had signed paperwork authorizing her to care for the child in case of emergency. But I didn't see proper documentation, so I contacted the chief physician, and then no one saw that woman again the next morning. The baby was gone too. Everyone assumed a family member had picked him up. Since there was no missing person report, the hospital quietly closed the file. Camille gasped. Do you remember what the woman looked like? Pale, small frame, long curly hair. I think her name was Renee. The name hit Camille like a punch to the chest. Renee Walsh. She turned and ran straight back to the hospital room. Callan was still sitting beside Leo. He looked up as Camille burst in, his eyes filled with that lost look of someone sensing everything was spinning beyond his control. What is it? He asked Callan. Renee wasn't your sister's relative. She took Leo from the hospital after he was born without proper authorization. Callan went still. You're saying she kidnapped him? Camille nodded slightly. We don't have legal proof yet, but everything matches. And if that's true, your custody of Leo could be called into question. Do you still have the documents Renee gave you? At home, Callan exhaled. I never doubted them. Camille looked him straight in the eye. Slowly. We need to take those documents to the hospital's legal department, and we need to find out who Renee really is. Not just for legal reasons, for Leo, if he inherited this disease from his mother, any medical information from his birth, any genetic history could be vital to save his life. Leo let out a faint groan, as if confirming it all. Callan gripped his son's hand tighter and nodded. I'll go get the papers. But Camille, if what you're saying is true, could they take him away from me? Camille didn't lie. She met his gaze and gave a quiet nod. They might. If we don't act fast, someone could use the law to take Leo from you. Callan stood. He kissed Leo's forehead, the boy now dozing after the first 4 does, then turned to Camille. If you know how to save him, do it. I'll be back before sunrise. Camille nodded. She didn't say what she was truly thinking, that the only one who might be able to stop this from spiraling out of control was her. Because inside her, a memory from 7 years ago had just come roaring back to life, and this time she wouldn't walk away like she once did. Callan's wooden cabin stood quietly at the edge of the forest, with only pale moonlight seeping through the old window frame. He didn't turn on the light. He didn't need to. His hands knew every inch of this humble home, a place where every chair, every drawer held the traces of 3 years of fatherhood. He opened the bottom drawer of the tall wooden cabinet, the one where he kept important things he never thought he'd need. The brown folder was still there, labeled Renee Walsh Custody Transfer 2022. Callan sat down, flipping through the pages. Signatures, seals, a law office name, everything seemed legitimate at first. But now, with what Camille had told him, every word on the page took on a suspicious edge. He took out his phone, snapped photos of every document, and emailed them to Camille, who was waiting at the hospital. But just as he was about to close the folder, something caught his eye. The notary seal. It was the name of a legal office he had heard of, but that had never actually existed in their town. "No way," he muttered. Callan stood up, grabbed his jacket and the folder, then rushed to his truck. The cold air hit his face like a slap, but his mind felt even colder. Leo was in the hospital, battling a rare disease, and he, the man who had raised the boy for 3 years, might not have any legal right to him. Back at the hospital, Camille had not left Leo's room all night. Every soft moan, every shift in heartbeat kept her alert. The boy was still unconscious, but the seizures had eased slightly after the first dose of steroids. Still, she knew this was only the beginning. Camille sat at the on-call doctor's desk, pulling up old hospital records from 2019, the case file of Amelia Brooks. As she followed the digital trail, she found the list of people involved at the time: attending physicians, nurses, security personnel. And one name made her stop cold: Brandon Cross, a freelance attorney who had represented the so-called temporary neonatal guardian in the mysterious disappearance of the newborn, was the same man who had once appeared in Camille's life 7 years ago. As a private investigator hired by her parents, Camille swallowed hard. Brandon was the one who had brought the photographs, the so-called undeniable evidence that Callan had betrayed her. He was seen hugging a woman outside a hotel, receiving money from a stranger, engaging in suspicious transactions. All of it was fabricated, and now he was back, this time not to destroy a love story, but possibly something far worse: a child trafficking scheme disguised as legal adoption support. Camille clenched her fists. She didn't know what made her angrier: Brandon himself, her parents, or the fact that she had believed all the lies. 6 a.m. Leo suddenly began seizing again. The monitor beeped wildly. Blood pressure dropped. Irregular pulse. Camille rushed into the room with a nurse. Administer a second dose of methylprednisone. Prepare IVIG 1 gram per kilogram, divided over 3 days. One hand held Leo's arm steady. The other adjusted the oxygen mask. The boy's face flushed deep red, sweat pouring from his temples. His eyes were shut tight, lips murmuring something unintelligible. The nurse glanced at the monitor, alarmed. Oxygen down to 89%. SpO2 is dropping fast. Add 2 liters of oxygen, Camille ordered. Increase PEEP. The monitor let out a long, continuous beep, then fell dangerously silent. The room froze. It felt like time had stretched into something longer than any thunderstorm. Camille leaned over, pressing her stethoscope to Leo's chest, heart still beating, breathing still present. "Okay," she exhaled. "He's holding on. Still with us." She looked at the nurse. "Call, I see you. We're moving him up for close monitoring." Callan returned to the hospital just as the sky began to pale. The folder was still clutched in his hand. his face drawn and tired. "He just had another seizure," Camille said, accepting the file from him. "I've started him on high-dose IV Big, but his condition is still very fragile." "You haven't slept?" he asked softly. Camille just shook her head. Sleep wasn't on her mind. She opened the folder, scanning each page, then pointed to a specific line. "This seal, it's fake. There's no notary office by that name. And this notary stamp, it's a scanned copy, not an original imprint." Callan nodded slowly. "I know." "Callan," Camille said, her voice softening, "I'm going to help you. Not just for Leo, but because I owe you an apology, a very big one." He didn't answer. He just tightened his grip on the armrest. "There's someone," Camille continued, "named Brandon Cross. If I'm right, he orchestrated everything, from our breakup to Leo's disappearance from the hospital. And he may not be done yet." Callan looked at her, something cracking behind his eyes. "Then we expose him, not just for me." "For Leo?" Camille nodded. "I won't walk away this time. Not again." The on-call doctor's office still carried the faint scent of cold coffee. Early morning light spilled through the frosted glass window, casting a long beam across the desk where Camille and Callan sat, surrounded by a thick stack of documents. "You're—" "Sure, it was Brandon Cross," Camille asked, her voice low. Callan nodded. "His name was on the copy of the custody affidavit Renee gave me. I never met him in person, but he was listed as the witness to the transfer of guardianship." Camille leaned back in her chair, eyes fixed on the ceiling. "He's the one who sent me the photos 7 years ago," she said, her voice hoarse. "Photos of you hugging a woman outside a hotel, taking cash, signing papers." Callan stiffened, his eyes dark with anger, not at Camille, but at the ghosts those memories had dragged back. "That was my sister, Amelia," he said. "I was helping her pay for rehab. And that money was from a student loan I took out to apply for your residency program." Camille closed her eyes. Each word from him stabbed into the part of her memory she had buried, the part where she should have trusted him and didn't. "Do you blame me?" she asked softly. Callan was silent for a long time. Then he shook his head. "I only blame myself for being vulnerable enough to let it destroy me." The office door opened. A man in a gray suit stepped inside. Chiseled features, slicked back. Hair, eyes like steel, and a voice so smooth it sounded more like he was addressing a courtroom than stepping into the room of a dying child. "Good morning," he said. "I'm Brandon Cross, legal representative for the party concerned with the welfare of the child known as Leo. I'm here to discuss the current custody arrangement." Camille stood, her eyes immediately sharp. "You're not allowed in the treatment area without a court order." "I'm not in the treatment area," he smiled. "I'm in an office, as any attorney concerned with child welfare has a right to be. And, pardon me, Dr. Hayes, but you don't have the authority to deny a civil discussion." Callan's hands clenched on the desk. "Welfare. Do you care about this boy's welfare? I've raised Leo for 3 years. Who the hell are you?" Brandon offered a polite smile, but his eyes were like blades. "Precisely because you have no formal legal status, I'm here. My client represents a prospective adoptive family, fully qualified, financially stable, medically capable of caring for a child with a rare condition." Camille let out a cold laugh. "It's just like how you represented me 7 years ago, when you destroyed my relationship with fake evidence." Brandon raised his eyebrows, feigning surprise. "Oh, I merely presented the facts. Whether you chose to believe them was your decision, Dr. Hayes." Callan shot to his feet. "Get out. If you came here to threaten us, you picked the wrong people." Brandon calmly placed a folder on the desk and slid it toward Callan. "Here are documents detailing your legal violations, unauthorized guardianship of a minor, accepting custody from someone with no verified rights. You could face criminal charges, Mr. Brooks. The boy is sick, Camille snapped. "If you have any shred of humanity left, you'll back off until he stabilizes." Brandon shrugged. Exactly because of his serious condition, he needs a more stable environment, not a man living in a forest cabin with an unstable income. Camille stepped forward, her voice icy. "I've alerted hospital security. If you're not out of this office in 60 seconds, they'll escort you out." Brandon kept his eyes on Callan a moment longer, then gave a curt nod. "Very well, but don't think you'll keep that boy much longer. The court will not overlook these violations. And when the time comes, don't say, 'I didn't warn you.'" He turned and left. The door clicked shut behind him, quiet as a breeze, but it left a storm raging in the hearts of those still inside. When Camille returned to Leo's room, the boy was still unconscious. But he let out a soft whimper, his lips moving once more. Camille leaned in, pressing her palm gently to his forehead. "Leo, it's Dr. Hayes. Can you hear me, sweetheart?" The boy breathed faintly, a whisper escaping his dry lips. "Pretty doctor lady, don't let them take me," Camille bit her lip. She felt the tears rise, unbidden, unstoppable. "No one's taking you anywhere," she whispered. "I promise." Leo lay still beneath the white hospital blanket, his pale skin blending almost seamlessly with the cold fluorescent light of the ICU. The machines around him beeped steadily, each sound cutting into Callan's chest like a blade. He had never feared anything in his life, till now, seeing a child he loved more than anything struggle to breathe against an illness he couldn't even begin to understand. Camille stood on the opposite side of the bed, eyes fixed on the neuromonitor. Her expression grave-like, she was counting each heartbeat with her own. Inflammation markers haven't dropped. She murmured, almost to herself. Callan looked up. "What did you say?" Camille turned to him, exhaling deeply. "I think Leo isn't responding well to the standard protocol. He may need a more customized treatment plan, but to do that, we need more genetic information. And to get that, we need to find out exactly who Leo is." Callan stayed silent. For 3 years, he had asked no questions. He had believed Renee, believed the paperwork, believed that feeling he had from the very first time he saw Leo, that this child was his, by something deeper than blood or paper. But now, everything he had once avoided was becoming a real and present threat, not just legally, but to the boy's life. Camille entered the hospital's record archive, where only a few dim lights illuminated the rows of old filing cabinets filled with thousands of medical cases. She searched records from 2019, the year Amelia Brooks had died. She typed in keywords: postpartum fatality, unidentified newborn, external guardianship, and the name reappeared: Renee Walsh, listed as the maternal aunt of a motherless newborn, a baby boy with a star-shaped birthmark. There was no DNA record, no legal guardianship file, and most tellingly, no camera footage. Camille shivered. A nurse walked in. It was Geneva, the same one on duty that night. "Nurse Geneva, do you remember what Renee said when she came to claim Leo?" Camille asked. "She didn't say much," Geneva replied, "but I remember her eyes, always scanning, cautious. And she kept emphasizing that she had a legal contact, some attorney. Cross, I think." Camille's hands clenched. "Brandon Cross." Geneva nodded. "That's the name." Later that afternoon, Camille called Callan into the physician's office. "There's something I need to tell you," she began, her tone serious. "Brandon wasn't just the one who signed Renee's papers. I believe he's running an underground network, one that collects newborns from poorly documented maternal deaths and hands them off to wealthy families looking to adopt quickly, without going through the legal system." Callan's fists clenched. "You're saying Leo is one of those kids?" "Not just one," Camille said. "I think Leo might be the first one that's been discovered. And if we don't stop this, There will be more. Callan paused, then nodded. Do you have a plan? Camille opened her laptop and showed him a list of documents Renee had signed. I need to verify every single name and find out how Renee, a woman with no blood relation, knew exactly where to find you. Callan froze. No one knew where my cabin was, except he trailed off, his face tightening. Except who? Camille asked. Your father, Callan said quietly. He hired someone to follow me for a while after you disappeared. I remember seeing a strange car parked near the woods for days. Camille went still. My father might be involved, she whispered, barely able to form the words. That evening, as Camille returned home briefly to grab a change of clothes, she found an unmarked envelope lying on her apartment desk. Inside was a black and white photograph. It showed her sitting beside Leo's hospital bed. Her eyes closed, one hand gently resting over the boy's. Beneath the photo is a torn scrap of paper with scrawled handwriting. You're good, Dr. Hayes, but too good usually doesn't last long. Camille froze. The apartment had been locked. She lived alone. No one had a key. No one, except the man who had once shattered her world and who was now trying to do it all over again. Back at the hospital, Leo suddenly crashed again. Another seizure, his skin began turning blue. Oxygen levels plummeted to 82%. Callan's voice shook as he called Camille. Camille, it's Leo, he's fading. The nurses can't stabilize him. Where are you? Camille stood alone in a quiet hallway, the photograph still clutched in her hand. Camille ran like she never had before. Down the hospital hallway, the fluorescent lights stretched across the walls like blurry streaks. In her hand, the photo and the thread were still crumpled, but she didn't tighten her grip. She wasn't afraid. Not anymore. Leo was dying, and she couldn't let him go. Not for her career, not for her reputation, but because he was Amelia's child, Callan's nephew. The one fragile thread that had somehow stitched together all the broken pieces of Camille's life into something that finally made sense. The ICU doors swung open. The monitor beeped in erratic bursts, scattered, chaotic. Nurses were scrambling to stabilize the ventilator. Another doctor, Dr. Leem, fumbled with the standard protocol that clearly wasn't working. Camille stepped through the door, her voice sharp and steady. Step aside. He's not responding to the standard protocol. I need to initiate protocol AE7C, gene-specific adjustment to methylprednisone dosage. Dr. Leem hesitated. You withdrew from this case. I'm re-entering as the only physician here with direct expertise in this disease. Camille didn't flinch. Callan stood at the bedside, his face pale, eyes hollow. He looked at her, not with anger or accusation, but with a silent question in his gaze. Can I trust you? Camille stepped closer, gently touching his arm. Callan, I need your consent. There's no time. If we delay, Leo won't make it through the night. A few seconds of silence, long enough to stretch into a lifetime. Then Callan gave a single nod. Save my son. 2 hours later, Leo was being treated with the customized protocol, a dosage sequence almost no one dared to use without in-depth genetic insight. Camille calibrated every figure, every breath from the ventilator, every minute of the IV flow. The boy began to stabilize. His heartbeat slowed, his breathing deepened, and the seizures stopped. Camille sank to the floor, her back against the wall. Her scrubs were soaked in sweat. Callan stood, motionless, watching his son sleep peacefully for the first time after 3 days of battling death. Then he turned to Camille, not with hollow gratitude, not with words, but by simply sitting beside her, both silent, surrounded by a quiet that said more than anything else could. The next morning, Camille walked alone into the hospital's underground parking garage. Brandon Cross was already there, as if he had known she would come. You Still like to interfere, don't you, Dr. Hayes? He said, voice calm. And you still like trading lives like they're real estate? Camille replied, ice in her voice. Brandon smiled faintly, not denying it. I don't break laws. I navigate the gaps. No missing person reports. No one looking. No one wants to adopt sick, orphaned infants. I place them with those willing to pay and care well. You call that a solution? And what do you call it? He asked, eyes narrowing like a blade. You walked away from Callan 7 years ago over photos I staged. You trusted your parents over your own heart. Oh, you're back. Trying. To play the hero, Camille stepped closer, her gaze no longer afraid but cold, sharp, with contempt. You haven't changed, still preying on people's weaknesses. But this time, you picked the wrong one. Brandon shrugged. Your parents hired me to track Callan 6 months ago when they learned you were back in Austin. They didn't want you tangled up with someone like him again. Camille stood still for a few seconds. Then she said, quietly, then tell them I'm not leaving again. Brandon popped open his car trunk and tossed a thick file toward her. They're prepared to file a lawsuit against Callan. Evidence, documents, allegations, enough to trigger emergency custody. Camille caught the file, but she didn't open it. And you'll get paid again, she said bitterly. Brandon smiled. Money always wins. Not this time, Camille replied, because I won't lose my family again. Back at the hospital, Camille told Callan everything about her parents, about the letters he had written that she never received, about the truth Brandon had finally confessed, and about, this time, how she was choosing to stay. Not to run away again. Callan didn't say anything at first. Then he stood, opened a drawer, and pulled out a faded folder. These letters, I wrote them over 2 years. I kept photocopies, in case one day you wanted to know. Camille took the folder, her hands trembling. Her eyes shimmered with unshed tears. I can't change the past, she whispered. But I'll do everything I can to protect this present. Later that afternoon, Leo slowly opened his eyes. He was weak, but there was light in his gaze again. Dad, his voice was raspy. I saw Mom. Callan leaned in. Mom, buddy. She looked like Dr. Camille. She said, I'm going to be okay. Camille's breath caught. Callan looked at her. You think it could have been Amelia? Camille gripped the sleeve of her white coat. I don't know, but I believe. When a mother loves her child, not even death lets her let go. The next morning, sunlight streamed diagonally through the ICU window, softly resting on Leo's hospital blanket like a quiet whisper. You're still here. You made it through. The boy slept soundly, his breathing steady, the color returning to his lips. The seizures were gone. Heart rate stable. Callan sat by the bed, gently brushing the damp curls off Leo's forehead. Every small movement of the boy was a living miracle. Callan had lost too much in life to believe in happy endings, but this time he believed. For Leo and for Camille, the door opened quietly. Camille stepped in, a stack of documents in hand. Her face still bore traces of tension, but something in her eyes for the first time no longer held back. He's doing better, Callan said with a faint smile. I think he's not ready to leave just yet. Not yet, Camille replied, moving to the bedside. There's still so much he doesn't know about himself. She set the folder down on the side table. These are photocopies of the original. Letters you wrote me. And this, she added, pulling out another envelope, is the internal legal report from the hospital. Every document Renee provided, forged. Callan nodded, unsurprised. But hearing it confirmed out loud, officially unraveled a knot that had been tied inside him for 3 long years. So Leo was handed to me as part of a system. Not fate, not chance. Someone planned this, he said. His fist clenched. Camille. met his gaze, her voice soft. But what they didn't plan was that you'd love him for real. They fell silent for a moment. Then Camille continued, I met with the hospital's chief legal officer. They've agreed to escalate the case. To the authorities, Brandon Cross will be investigated. And I filed a formal witness statement with the court against my own family. Callan turned to her. You're sure? Camille nodded. I stayed silent once. I can't stay silent again. That afternoon, they both entered the hospital's internal hearing room, where legal reps, administrators, and security personnel were already waiting. On screen, document after document appeared. Fake notary seals, non-existent law office addresses, names of medical staff that didn't exist. Camille stood, hands trembling slightly, but her voice was firm. Brandon Cross didn't just provide forged documents. He manipulated evidence that led me to break off an engagement with Callan Brooks 7 years ago. His actions didn't just destroy a family. They endangered a child's life. One of the hospital lawyers nodded. We've prepared an emergency report for the district attorney's office, but we need one more thing. A medical file confirming Leo's biological relation to Callan using Amelia Brooks' records. Callan pulled out a DNA test result requested by Camille the moment the truth had begun to unfold. Here, DNA comparison between a sample from my hair and Leo's match rate, 99.8%. The room went quiet. Then a representative from Child Services, Ms. Chen, slowly nodded. Then biologically, you are the closest living relative to this child. Not just biologically, Callan said, voice rough. I'm his father. For the last 3 years, I've bathed him, rocked him through fevers, taught him to say sorry, cooked when he refused to eat. I don't need papers to know who I am in his life. Under the table, Camille gently squeezed his hand. That night, Leo woke up completely. He opened his eyes and saw both of them sitting by his bedside. His gaze was tired, but lit up when he saw their faces. I'm hungry, he whispered. Barely audible, Callan laughed, eyes misty. Say that again? I didn't quite catch it. I want corn porridge. Leo frowned slightly. The one you make, Camille had to cover her mouth to keep her laughter in. Corn porridge, Callan. No escaping that one. Leo glanced at Camille. Then mumbled softly, You smell like my mom. Callan and Camille looked at each other. Their hearts clenched, not because of science or DNA, but because a child had recognized love before the grown-ups dared to call it by name. The courtroom was small that day, but the air inside felt heavy as lead. Leo wasn't present. The boy was still under close watch at the hospital, recovering from days teetering on the edge of life. But everything about him, every medical file, every photograph, every trace of love was there, represented by 2 people seated side by side. Callan Brooks and Dr. Camille Hayes. Presiding over the hearing was Judge Patricia Weathers, a seasoned woman known for her sharp mind and impartial rulings. She wore glasses, and her discerning gaze scanned every person in the room as if to silently ask who speaks truth and who only pretends to. We are convening to address the legal guardianship of the minor child known as Leo Hayes Brooks. She began. Petitioner, the Texas Child Services Department, at the request of the Austin Central Hospital's legal review. She glanced at the hospital's legal representative. You may proceed with your summary. The hospital attorney stood. Your Honor, Leo is a child who lost his mother at birth. The mother, Amelia Brooks, passed away due to medical complications. During this time, a woman named Renee Walsh falsely claimed familial ties and, through unknown means, removed the infant from the healthcare system. She placed him in the care of Callan Brooks, a man previously unaware of the child's existence, along with a set of forged custody documents. He paused, lifting a binder of evidence. However, over the past 3 years, Mr. Callan Brooks has raised Leo by himself, without seeking aid, without complaint, and most importantly, with unwavering love and sacrifice. Judge Weathers gave a brief nod. "Thank you, Mr. Brooks. Do you wish to respond?" Callan rose. He wasn't in a suit. He stood in his usual rugged work shirt, calloused hands at his sides. A posture that bent slightly from habit, but his eyes were rooted deep, like oak. "I don't know much about the law," he began. "All I know is 3 years ago, I opened the door to my garage and found a child no one wanted. I didn't ask if he was mine by blood. I only knew he was cold and hungry. And I wanted to keep him warm." He pulled a folded drawing from his pocket, old paper, smudged colors, a crayon sketch of him and Leo, with the child's handwriting scrawled across the top. "My dad is Callan. I don't have degrees. I'm not rich. But I've read him books every night. I learned how to make soup without eggs because of his allergy. I remake his bed twice a night because he used to wet it. I took a first aid course just to know how to comfort him when he coughed." Callan looked directly at the judge. "I don't know how to give a proper legal statement, but if you need papers to prove I'm his father, then something's wrong, because everything I've done for him is the proof." The courtroom fell silent. People often said emotions couldn't determine law, but in that moment, something more real than paperwork was present: unconditional love. Then it was Camille's turn. She stood, her eyes settling on her parents seated in the front row. Listed as secondary petitioners: Dr. Elizabeth Hayes, a renowned cardiologist; Professor Robert Hayes, a respected medical academic, once proud to say he never made a mistake guiding his daughter's path. Camille looked at them, steady. "7 years ago, I believed the photos you gave me," she said. "I believed Callan was a mistake. I believed my medical career would collapse if I married him, and so I left." She lifted her chin. "But today I'm standing here, not as a doctor, but as a witness to one truth: the man you once disapproved of saved the life of your own grandson." Elizabeth shook her head, voice taut with frustration. "You don't understand. We only wanted you to have the life you deserve." "No, you're wrong," Camille replied, her voice calm, unwavering. "You wanted me to live your life. And if I don't speak today, Leo will continue being a child without a place to belong. Just like I once lost mine because of your pride." Judge Weathers raised a hand, gently cutting the rising tide of emotion. "Thank you, Dr. Hayes. The court recognizes your statement. We will now recess for 30 minutes before delivering a verdict." 30 minutes later, the courtroom quieted once more. Judge Weathers rested her hands on the ruling. After reviewing legal documentation, DNA results, medical records, and, most notably, the current caregiving conditions, the court hereby grants full legal guardianship to Mr. Callan Brooks. We also formally confirm the biological relationship to the deceased mother, Amelia Brooks. Callan bowed his head, his hands clenching tightly. Furthermore, the court acknowledges the extraordinary medical and emotional support provided by Dr. Camille Hayes in the child's recovery, and encourages her continued involvement in his care. Camille turned to Callan, her eyes filled with emotion. He leaned toward her and whispered, "Thank you for not walking away." She smiled gently. "This time, I choose to stay." Leo was discharged on an early autumn afternoon, the sky not too sunny, but bright enough that the breeze rustled gently through the trees outside the hospital window. He wasn't as fragile as before, though he still required light respiratory support and scheduled follow-ups. Even so, his eyes, sharp and gleaming like a tiny flame, had never lost their fire. Callan carried Leo from the car into their new home. The small house on the outskirts of town wasn't far from the city, but quiet enough that you could hear the wind curl around the porch. They no longer lived in the old garage. This house had 2 bedrooms, a modest kitchen, and most special of all, a round window that opened to a backyard full of sunflowers. Dad, Leo whispered as Callan placed him on the new bed covered. In space-themed sheets, our house smells like pie. The secret is nutmeg. Callan smiled, pulling off the boy's shoes. But don't say it out loud. Camille thinks it's a secret. Leo giggled, then let out a long yawn. Camille stepped in from the kitchen, her hands still dusted with flour, watching the two whisper like it was some sacred ritual. She sat beside Leo, gently rubbing his back. "Think you'll be ready to eat in a little while?" she asked. Leo nodded. "Just corn porridge, not the green thing." "Understood, sir," she said, feigning seriousness. That night, after Leo had fallen asleep, Callan stepped out onto the porch. He settled into the old wooden chair, a cup of chamomile tea in hand. It wasn't his favorite, but it was Camille's, and lately its warmth had started to grow on him. Camille joined him, sitting in silence for a moment. The wind played with her hair. The glow from inside the house lit just enough of her face for him to see the soft weariness there and peace. "I used to think I didn't deserve this," Callan said quietly. "Deserve what?" "Home. A dinner table with laughter. A child calling me dad. And a woman who doesn't leave." Camille tilted her head to look at him. "Callan," he did in turn. "7 years ago, I was angry with you. But now, I get it. You were just a girl caught between love and expectation. Just like I was a man who stayed quiet because I was scared of losing you." She didn't answer. Instead, she reached out and placed her hand over his. This time, she said, "We can learn again. From the beginning." 1 month later, they hosted a small gathering, just a few close friends, colleagues, and neighborhood families. There was no grand wedding, just a simple dinner table, a bouquet of yellow chrysanthemums, warm apple pie, and mulled cider. Camille wore a white short-sleeve dress, her hair in a soft bun. A star-shaped pendant around her neck, a birthday gift from Callan. On Leo's recovery day, Leo, dressed in a tiny vest and red body, marched down the makeshift aisle, holding a ring box like he was on a galactic mission. "We practiced, okay?" he announced loudly as he walked between the rows of chairs. "Dad, remember to bow when Camille does. Don't drop the rings, and you have to kiss. But just a little, don't embarrass me." Laughter erupted. Callan chuckled, glancing at Camille. "I think I'm officially being managed by a tiny astronaut." "I've never felt safer," she replied, smiling. And just like Leo instructed, they bowed. They exchanged rings. And they kissed gently, enough for the boy to sigh in relief and dash forward to wrap his arms around both of them. "So now I have a dad and a mom, right?" Leo asked, eyes sparkling. Callan and Camille both nodded. "Yes, so that means I really have a home now." Camille knelt down and hugged him close. Not just a home, a whole world. That night, after the guests had gone, the three of them sat together on the porch. Above them, a shooting star streaked across the sky. Leo pointed up. "Dad, I saw a star that looks like my birthmark." Callan ruffled his hair. "That's because you're the most special thing I've ever seen." Camille took both of their hands and placed them over her heart. "And from now on," she whispered, "no matter where that star came from, even if it started as a scar, it became the light that led us home." Perhaps the most beautiful part of this story is in the courtroom victory or the wedding filled with flowers. It's the moment a once-abandoned child realizes he's been chosen, not out of duty, but out of love. It's when a man who thought he had nothing left finds everything in a tiny voice that calls him dad, and in the eyes of the woman who once walked away, but this time chose to return. Thank you for staying with us until the very last moment of today's story. Where are you listening from? Saigon, Hanoi, or perhaps a quiet corner of a faraway city? Leave us a comment. Let Snail Story know if this story reached your heart. And don't forget to like and subscribe, so each week we can take another journey Slow, gentle, but deeply real. See you again very soon.